Good afternoon. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this symposium, Gender Studies and Feminisms in the Guyanas, Crossing Rivers. My name is Patsy Lewis, and I'm the director of the Center for Latin American and Caribbean Studies, located at the Watson Institute for International and Public Affairs at Brown University. CLACS is one of the oldest, it's the oldest, area studies center at Brown. And we bring together faculty and affiliated students across the university who work on Latin America and the Caribbean. It is my distinct pleasure to also specially welcome our cohort visiting professor for this spring 2021, and who will also be returning to us next spring 2022, Professor Kamala Kempadu. And to briefly introduce her before turning over the symposium to her. Professor Kempadu is a sociologist and professor in the Department of Social Science at New York University, Canada. She studied at the University of Amsterdam, Ohio State University, and the University of Colorado Boulder. She teaches Caribbean studies, Black radical and Black feminist thought, sex work studies, and critical anti-trafficking studies, and has published extensively on the Caribbean sex trade and global anti-trafficking discourses. I would like to welcome her and also welcome the rest of the panelists, Julia Terborg, Tina Harpin, and Pauline Bullen. I now hand over to Professor Kamala Kempadu.
Thank you, Patsy. Thank you, Professor Lewis. It's a pleasure to be here and to be with CLACS this term. I am delighted that we could have this event today. It is part of my class, actually, in part the seminar class that I'm teaching at Brown this term on Caribbean feminisms, and as part of the cohort visiting professorship. And I'd like to welcome everybody, but also especially the students in my class, because this is also for them or for you. Today's panel, and we are hoping that our third panelist will join us soon. We're not too sure what's happened from Guyana, but she hopefully will pop up at some point here. The panel of speakers is part of a longer standing exchange and dialogue that I and Alyssa Trotz have been engaged with for several years. The aim was to support the development of gender studies and feminist research in the Guyanas through dialogue and events between the Guyanas and feminists of the Guyanas in the diaspora, such as myself in Canada and Alyssa Trotz, who is also at the University of Toronto. The impetus for this came from our engagement with Caribbean feminisms and people in the region, and the realization that the Guyanas area, and we're not just talking about Guyana of formerly British Guyana, but the Guyanas more broadly, especially Suriname and French Guyana or Guyane, are often overshadowed in Caribbean feminism by ideas and work that come out of the island chain. So we think of Caribbean as being the island, and that predominantly has configured and defined Caribbean feminism. So we kind of wanted to explore more the specificities of the Guyanas, and then particularly that part of South, because it's both part of South America and the Amazon, yet it shares a political, social, and economic history with the Caribbean islands, and particularly, the areas that we know, the West Indies or the Antilles, the French Antilles, the Dutch Antilles, and so forth. So there's this overlapping geographic, but also political and economic relationship between the island chain and South America. But we felt that there's also something very specific to being in the Guyanas. as part of Caribbean feminism as well, and have wanted to explore that. So over the years, we've held several activities that have brought teams from Guyana and Suriname together. And I think we've been working together since about 2013, 2014. And we've had workshops on research and teaching in Toronto, in Trinidad, at the University of the West Indies. There was a course that was taught between Guyana and Suriname on gender studies. And there have been various visits with lecturers and activists between the units in Guyana and Suriname. And since around the end of 2019, I think, we've been in touch with, welcome Pauline, thank you. We've been in touch with scholars in French Guyana. And Tina Harpin has been able to join us in this discussion and dialogue. Although this is our first event with participants in all three countries, but we'd especially like to welcome Tina to this collaboration. We are working also towards a larger set of panels and sessions around the Guyana's feminisms through the Caribbean Studies Association meeting later this year. And hopefully a publication will be coming out of that as well, specifically about these Guyana feminisms. But today, what we are aiming to do is to talk about what is taking place in the three countries around gender studies and feminism. And so each speaker will present for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll open it up for discussion. Elisa Trotz is unable to join us. She would be the discussant today. She was not going to present, but she would be the discussant, but she's unable to make it due to a family emergency in Guyana that that's consuming her attention. And so we wish her and her family the best. I would like to just introduce the panelists quickly. There is a bio on the website, but I shall just highlight some of these from the bio. So Julia Terborg is a sociologist with a PhD in social science from the University of Amsterdam, and she lectures in the Faculty of Social Science at the Anton University of Suriname. She's also the president or the chair of the board of the Institute for Women, Gender and Development Studies at that university. She combines her academic work with activism in the national and regional women's health movement. For example, she is the president of Foundation Lobi, Stichting Lobi, which is a member association of International Planned Parenthood Federation. Since 1998, she's also an active member of the Latin American and Caribbean Women's Health Network and is closely involved in the monitoring of several human rights conventions, including CEDAW, ICPD and CRC. She has numerous publications and frequently presents publicly on key social issues. Julie will start us off in a little while. Let me introduce the other two and then we can go straight in. Tina Harpin is an associate professor in comparative literature at Université de Guyana. In migration, I'm not sure if I'm saying this right, interculturalité, éducation, in Amazonie. So migration, interculturalism, education, and the Amazon, correct? Her research is focused on American and African Francophone and Anglophone literatures, politics, ethics, and aesthetics, post-colonial and gender studies, trauma studies, and eco-poetics. She is co-director with Claudine Reynaud of the special issue Feminisme Noir, which is forthcoming in July 2021, and was co-creator and co-editor of the research blog Fempoco, which is post-colonial feminisms. She is also co-director of a book with the Writing Back Collective on post-colonial studies. She herself is from Martinique. She obtained her PhD with highest distinction from the University of Paris, and since 2015 has lived and worked in Guyana. Welcome, Tina. Thirdly, Pauline Bullen is a feminist scholar, sociologist, and educulturalist committed to the principles of teachers as cultural workers. She earned her PhD in sociology and equity studies in education from the University of Toronto in Canada, while working full-time with the Toronto District School Board as an equity and human rights instructional leader. Pauline has 20 years of experience working with the Toronto Board as one of its lead instructors for inclusive human rights and social justice education practices, and has gained professional international development experience through working in the US, Africa, and the Caribbean on gender integration, gender analysis, curriculum design, and gender transformative programming. She currently holds the position of director for the Institute of Gender Studies at the University of Guyana, and is also a senior research associate in the Department of Social Work at the University of Johannesburg, South Africa. All three, as you can tell, have immense experience with both the university and beyond. And I will first hand it over to Julia, then Tina will follow and Pauline. But Julia will start us off by talking about gender studies and the feminist research that's happening in Suriname as much as possible. Thank you, Julia.
Yes, thank you, Kamala. I'm not sure if my screen is visible. I started sharing my screen. Is it visible?
Yes, perhaps you can enlarge it. Excellent.
Enlarge now?
Yep.
Yes. Good afternoon, everybody. A special greeting to you, Kamala, the panelists, Tina and Pauline. I'm very happy to join this event and also very grateful to you, Kamala. It's a pity that Alisa is not present with us today, but we know that over the years, you and Alisa, you know, were a big support to the Institute for Women, Gender and Development Studies in Suriname. There was a lot of support in the area of capacity strengthening. And I think it's very important to mention that you know, as part of the whole strengthening of the dialogue of the Guyanas, especially you and Alisa were really key. So thank you for that. I was asked to give a few on, yes, a short few story on the development of our institute and our experience. So I would be happy to share those experiences with you. Before I start with that, I think it's good to give you a brief introduction on Suriname. I think you know, perhaps you know Suriname, but Suriname is also characterized as the best kept secret on the continent. So I think it would be good to give you some basic facts about Suriname. We are a big country with a quite small population, about 500,000, but a large country, 164,000 square meters. Our population resides mainly in the urban coast, about 80%, and then the remaining inhabitants live in what we call the hinterland, you know, the rural interior. We are a former Dutch colony, gaining independence in 1975. That explains why our official language is Dutch. We have a lingua franca, which is Ranantongo. And a part of those main languages, we have many other languages. And that is also related to the fact that we have many ethnic groups. We are, in terms of ethnicity and religiousness, very diverse. We have Hindustani, those are the main ethnic group at this moment, followed by the Maroons, Creole, Javanese, Chinese, all descendants from slaves and contract laborers in the colonial period. And apart from that, we also have some smaller ethnic groups. We always had labor migrants from initially mainly from Guyana and Haiti, but in the recent years, increasingly Brazilians working in the gold mining, small gold mining, also what we call the new Chinese working in constructions, and recently we have increasing migrant flows from Cuba and other parts of South America. As you notice on the card, we border in the east to Guyana, French Guiana, and in the west to Guyana. And in these two borders, we have frequent traffic of persons. In French Guiana, we have large populations of Maroons and Japanese. And in Guyana, you know, there's a long history of crossing rivers. So that is shortly about Suriname. Now I want to proceed with women and gender studies in Suriname. We have a long history starting in 1993 with a small group of women looking at, you know, how can we integrate women issues in the university, you know, because women were almost not visible in the university, and also women's issues were almost not studied. So this was the start of a long path. In 1995, we were able to establish gender study as a mandatory course in the curriculum of the sociology department. In 1999, we went a step further with the establishment, with the preparations for the establishment of a gender institute with the support of UNIFEM, now UN Women. And in 2006, we succeeded in the formal launch of the Institute for Women, Gender and Development Studies. It was part of the Faculty of Social Science and mainly linked to the Department of Sociology. In 2014, you know, while the structure was there, the structure was not really functioning. And it was only in 2014 with the assignment of a full-time coordinator, and 2 years after that, the assignment of the availability of a part-time researcher, that the institute, you know, was really functioning. And we also activated the board, and we had an accelerated speed, you know, in our activities and in our exposure. The process, as you see, during the years, and now we're talking about a 20-year period, we had ups and downs, and unfortunately at this moment, you know, this year, our coordinator position became vacant. And because of all kind of changes that are taking place at the university, there's a big uncertainty about, you know, the continuation of this function in the institute. What was our focus? As I said, the courses started already in 1995. And in those courses, we had particular focus, and I want to share those emphasis with you. Women's empowerment. That's why we kept women in the name of the institute. Women's empowerment was key. You know, increased visibility of women's contribution, inclusion of women's voices and women's issues in research, policy, and program development. It was important to educate, you know, students on gender as an instrument of analysis, not only on how gender relations work and how, you know, how they are developed within specific contexts, but also looking at, the issue of multiple genders, gender identities. We also look at feminist theory and methodology. This is really key in the courses to have this fundamental theoretical backgrounds, in which critical and feminist methodology is the departing point. Gender studies is presented from an international approach, and as you know, this is the link with other social forces as ethnicity, age, living conditions, sexual orientation, etc. We also look very practical at how in existing development strategies gender relations are considered and how these policies and programs impact on gender relations, whether they lead to reproduction of gender inequality, or whether they contribute to transforming gender relation to a more equal in a more equal setting. We see gender studies as an instrument for transformation, for change. How can gender study contribute to transforming gender relations and other unequal social relations? And there is a strong link also with activism, because research and teaching are seen as instruments for change and to enhance agency and empowerment. The link, therefore, against this background, the link with Caribbean feminism is very clear from the beginning. We know that the women's struggle in the Caribbean has a long history. Since slavery, contract labor, women played a leading role. And even when we look at gender studies, it has strong roots in the Caribbean women and feminist movement. And one of our best examples is the Institute for Gender and Development Studies at the UWI, which was also established in the 90s, and compared with other gender studies is a very strong location, and a very big example for us. Also, when we look at the broader Latin American Caribbean feminist movement, we see that always there was this strong commitment, despite multiple backlashes in the past year. There was always a strong role in the human rights movement and strong partnerships with groups in marginalized positions. And even now, we see the session, the international meeting virtually on the status of women, physically located in New York is going on, the 65th session. And even on that platform, we see a lot of active engagement and involvement of Caribbean feminists. Even when we look at the SDG, we see that in all 17 goals, gender is mainstream. And this is really thanks to all these amazing women worldwide and in the Caribbean. Despite, this continued development of the feminist movement, we also see continued challenges. And I think more than ever, we have to strategize on how to enhance and how to develop creative approaches that connects to today realities and that are inclusive, so connecting with all. We know that feminism is very diverse, and I want to refer to this very important statement made already in the 80s, about how diverse feminism is. Sorry. The diversity of feminism and the need to respond to different needs and concerns. and take into account different women and how they define feminism, for themselves. And this position is often reiterated also by leading Caribbean scholars as Antrobus, Reddock, Hussein. I think it's also important when we talk about Caribbean feminism on how to connect to, learn from, and effectively support and reflect experiences and voices of women and men not yet visible and heard. So taking all this into account, we in our activities as an institute,
Julie, I'm just going to jump in here.
Sorry.
You're gonna have to cycle through a little faster if you can.
Yes.
Possible? Yeah.
Yes, so we have a lot of activities. It's not only courses, but we also are very active in the area of conscious raising, capacity strengthening, advocacy. Here we have some pictures. This is a public event with the LGBT community. And this is a capacity strengthening training with police officers on the issue of prevention of violence against women. One of the key regional activities that we had, and with the support of, Trinidad and York University, and in close partnership with Guyana, was a blended course on gender and sexuality. And it was really a partnership in designing the course, but also in lecturing the course and in evaluation. This is the closing of the course, with all the stakeholders. When we look at the response to gender studies, we see that the most positive response is mainly from students. They really, our experience is that they really appreciate, the classes, because these are always interactive, and they are really eager to understand how gender works and how gender impacts on their daily lives. This also resulted in a rapid increase in gender-related thesis topics, among undergraduate students, but also graduate students in the master programs. When it comes to response of lecturers, the response is less, less significant. It's slower. But we see an increase of involvement of lecturers integrating gender in their courses. And yes, on the institutional level, the support and the political support remains a big challenge. When we look at the thesis topics of students, these are very diverse. And they range from, historic development of women's role to women and climate change, women in politics, gender in the workplace, and not only on issues that are taking place in the public sphere, but increasingly also on issues in the private sphere, the more controversial, contentious issues like violence against women, but also changing gender roles and the responses of these changes in ethnic specific communities. We see also a lot of thesis topics on gender and sexuality, and also on reproductive health. One of the recent thesis, bachelor thesis, was on femicide, which is, is a big issue now, I think, in all of the Guyanas. But we also see students, engagement in that issue. After all these years, we have continued challenges. And I think the main challenge is really rooted in our institutional weakness, limited capacity, no budget. We have to recruit our own budget. We are very dependent on faculty facilities, and in particular now, when the university is restructuring due to limited budgets, and there's a high risk of further marginalization of our institute. what we see over the years that we are strongly dependent on the goodwill and commitment of individuals. When we look overall, we see that the institute is mainly visible in the faculty structure of social sciences, and then in particular linked to the sociology department. And you know, this has all to do with the low gender awareness in national policy implementation, which is also reflected in the university, and also very limited funds for research. So how we should move forward? I think that it's very important to continue advocating, you know, for the continuity and sustainability of the institute. We have to strengthen our partnerships with allies within and outside the university and on national, regional, and international level. I think following this panel, it's important to also explore opportunities to strengthen, you know, the ties within the Guyanas. And I think what is also very important is to identify common key issues, you know, in particular, this issue of gender-based violence, femicide, but also universal access to health, stigma and discrimination, shared responsibilities, and masculinities. That was my presentation. Finally, some photos. This is a photo of the students, a big group of students that is attached at to the institute. And they are the ambassadors against violence against women, and they work in under the leadership of the institute. They educate and raise awareness in communities and in schools. This is our involvement in a public walk, and this is a fair, you know, that we had. These are some of the meetings we had.
Thank you very much.
So that was my presentation, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Julia. We'll move on to Tina in French Guyana, who I also know has a. So Julia, you'll have to take down stop sharing your screen.
Yes.
And so Tina can have a go. Welcome, Tina. Thank you. Thank you, Julia.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much, Kamala. I'm very grateful and I'm very pleased to be here with you and to join the conversation on gender studies and feminisms in the Guyanas. So I will share my screen. So, and okay. Yes, so I think that I'm going to present some information about French Guyana first, and I will begin by saying that it's a French department, an overseas department and region since 1946, and it's the only French territory in South America. It's mostly known nowadays for its French space center, but it was a former colony, penal colony, as you can see on the picture. It's a big region. It's one of the largest French region with 83,846 square kilometers, mostly covered by forests. And it's one of the least densely populated region with only 294,000 inhabitants. There we have, as a currency, we have the euro and we speak French, but there are many other languages such as Spanish, Portuguese, Creoles, and Mandarin. And it's linked to the fact that we have a very diverse population. So there are indigenous people, Maroon or Native American. We have Creole people who are of African descent and also of mixed origins. We have also migrants from the Caribbean, South America, Like in Suriname, we have a lot of Asian, Brazilians, Dominican, Cubans that are coming. And we have also French people coming from mainland France and from the West Indies, the French West Indies, so mainly Guadeloupe and Martinique. So our university in French Guyana, Université de Guyane, is a newborn university. In fact, it's a 5-year-old university, and it was born from a strike in 2013. So it was fully implemented in 2015. It's the year of my arrival in French Guyana. And I will explain to you why there was a strike in 2013, because it's important. Students and teachers went on strike in 2013 because of the governance of the former University of French West Indies and Guyana. So there was a University of French West Indies and Guyana, but French Guyanese felt like they were not listened to, and they couldn't decide anything about what was going on in on their campus. So they decided to go on strike. And the president of the former University of French West Indies and Guyana was in Martinique at the time. And the conflict lasted 4 months. So the French government decided to agree to this idea of a new separate university, the University of French Guyana. And this university was created in 2015. So I must say that the conditions of birth of this new university were highly political, and therefore academics working now in the university can feel a kind of pressure from the outside, because everything that we do is scrutinized, and we have also, we can see that it's used in political debates that we can't really control. And sometimes it's quite disturbing. So now I will tell you a little about gender studies at the University of French Guyana. So it's a small scale university that is facing multiple challenges. We have about 5,000 students, and well, we have no institutes of gender studies, no gender studies program, training program. So it's not like Suriname. I think that Suriname has developed gender studies for many years now. Here in French Guyana, everything has to be launched and to get started. So we can also say that in this territory, there is no observatory on violence against women. There is no National Women's and Feminist Rights Information Center. And there are some activists and people who are working to help women. And I can quote this organization whose name is Arbre Fromager, the Kapok Tree. It's one of the most important women's associations in French Guyana, and it was founded 18 years ago. In the university, we have launched a course, which is actually a research seminar with my colleague, Dr. Ahmed Mullah, in 2018. And it's the only existing course on gender studies at the university for now. We were joined more recently by a new doctor, Dr. Julia Manera, who is a specialist of Brazilian literature. This research seminar was at first for students and colleagues, but we decided to open it to the public. And in fact, it was quite a success. and it sparked interest on gender studies and feminisms. I can say that many debates were held regarding the myth of the matriarch, for example, and violence against women in French Guiana. And we also decided with Ahmed Mullah to publish a research notebook online. And this research notebook aims to provide access to our scientific activities and to help people to go further and to provide some scientific materials. But I can say that we'll feel a little bit alone. So that's why I'm so grateful to be here with you and to meet Julia Terborg and Pauline Boulin, because there is an obvious lack of gender studies research in French Guiana. If I can give an example, I can talk about the Virage survey. So it was a national survey on violence against women in 2015 that left French Guiana out. So it was focused on mainland France, Martinique, Guadeloupe, and the Réunion Island. And this is one out of many examples that we can give to show that there is much work to do about gender studies and feminisms in French Guiana. One positive aspect of our work with Ahmed Mullah and now with Julia Nera is the fact that we can see how involved the students are. The students are participating into our seminar, and we also publish some texts from the students, above all creative writings that help them raise awareness on women's issue. So for example, lately I published narratives about the witch figure in French Guiana. And it was very impressive because there were actually, through fiction, testimonies about violence against women in different communities. And one of these texts was about incest, for example, in the Maroon community, which is a taboo. And I think that this work that we develop with students through art and through theory is very, very important. So to conclude, my colleagues and I are trying to trigger a gender dynamic, a gender studies dynamic at the University of French Guiana. And it's probably the right time because of the current global conversations about women's rights and about feminism. And as literature professors, we also believe in the power of literature and arts to help raise some issues and to break silences and to develop gender studies. So thank you for your time and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you very much. That really gives us a nice idea of where you can go in French Guiana. So thank you. Great. I think we should turn to Pauline now. Are you there, Pauline? She disappeared again. Pauline, are you?
Yes, I'm here. I just had to unmute.
Oh, sorry.
And I will share my video.
Great.
So I'll be talking about gender studies program here in Guyana. And I do have a PowerPoint that I can share if you allow me to share my screen.
Tina, can you take down your PowerPoint? Thank you.
Hopefully I'll be able to do that, yes. Let's see. So everybody should be able to see that.
Yep.
So that's where I am at the moment. One moment. Slideshow.
You can probably enlarge it tonight.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do from beginning. There we go.
Lovely.
Good. So I am, as was mentioned, the director for the Institute of Gender Studies here in Guyana. And the institute was launched in 2015, and I came in 2017. And as you see, the objective was to find somebody who had at least a master's degree in order to lead the work of the institute. So I came from Canada. I studied at OISE, University of Toronto, and my PhD is in sociology and equity studies in education. So I too will tell you a little bit about Guyana, not vastly different from what you've heard already. I just need to, this is blocking my view. The total population is less than 800,000 with an annual growth rate of 49%, 0.49%. Males are about approximately 394,000 and women 386,000 from the research that I found. Most people stay in rural areas with the urban population making 26.61% of the total population. And the country has a young population with people aged 0 to 14 years, making 28% of the total population, according to the World Bank 2019 study. And there are those between 25 and 54 years of age that make up about 38% of the population. And in terms of gender, females contribute 22% of family work, compared to 10% of males, according to a 2018 International Labor Standard estimate. And then Guyana ranks 55th out of 117 qualifying countries in the Global Hunger Index with a score of 12.6, meaning that it suffers moderate level of hunger, and the proportion of the undernourished population is below 10%. The Institute's mission is to build on the existing strengths of the university and its partners to be a hub for multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary teaching, research, dialogue, and action on local and transnational issues, on women and gender issues. The vision was to build up an international reputation of excellence, not only in teaching, but in research and social action, thereby contributing to the transformation of relations between women and men and gender, other groups of people here, and gender justice in Guyana, the region, and transnationally. Our objective is to introduce a cross-faculty introductory foundation course in gender studies for first-year students, and that we still have to accomplish, although the course has been written. Introduce online undergraduate and postgraduate teaching programs for faculty, students, and other stakeholders at the master's and doctoral study involved in master's and doctoral studies. That too has also to develop. Strongly encourage and support faculty and students to undertake interdisciplinary research linked to the our research agenda in terms of looking at a variety of gender issues, and to work together with partners to fundraise for research and scholarship opportunities, and to take the lead in the annual review of the UG's sexual harassment policies and related penalties guiding that particular policy. That it has to happen also. Contribute towards the delivery of community outreach extramural programs in the community, civil society groups, NGOs and governmental agencies, lobby government and non-government partners, Right now, we partner with the Women and Gender Equality Commission, for example, to provide an annual academic scholarship to support one female student studying in the fields of technology and the sciences. And that we have been able to successfully do, and have a young woman who has been receiving the scholarship and will receive it until she graduates. Encourage government and non-government partners to provide an annual research scholarship. Well, that's repeating what I've said already. Utilize the expertise of the university, the Center for Communications, for example, and with other partners to promote advocacy messages to foster critical thinking and actions on women, gender, and human rights. And that, you know, I've been able to spearhead in having sessions on community radio, on television, and, you know, going into the community to give various presentations. We need a lot of resources. Since I've been here in 2017, we do not have an institute space to work out, you know, a space that would allow for the type of research or workshops and presentations and interactions, daily interactions with students. So that is something that I feel would greatly benefit such an institute, because of the fact that we are wanting, because the part of the mission is to develop those community relationships on and off campus. You know, we don't have staff this is my fourth year here. For 1 year, we did have secretarial assistant. And then in my second year, I was able to gain a research assistant. And so at present, the institute is run by myself and the research assistant who helps with, you know, research initiatives. We both also teach courses. So for example, this semester, we taught the Women and Gender and Development Studies course that had a total of 170 students. And so we've been having to mark papers, you know, mark papers, and plan workshops and do community outreach, engage in research partnerships with people not only here in Guyana, but in other spaces, Trinidad. You know, I network with other scholars in various other countries, and so in order to do collaborative work. So staff is badly needed. You know, we have a vacancy for a community stakeholder specialist at the moment. We need an administrative officer to help with a lot of the media work, because a lot of what is involved in terms of outreach is advertising the initiatives that we are, you know, that we have been a part of. And so that is really important. You know, the research assistant, we are supposed to have 2, we have 1. And then we utilize the IT specialist and library tech support when we have meetings and workshops. And so, you know, and monies are badly needed to fund our programs. We do get funding from the Women and Gender Equality Commission, which is matched by the university. But a lot of the support of the work that I am able to spearhead on behalf of the Institute is because of the goodwill and generosity of experts and scholars internationally that I have been able to meet and collaborate with over the years in my work, not only in Canada, but in New York and in Zimbabwe, where I taught at a women's university in Zimbabwe, and people that I meet here in Guyana. So the research approach that we take is generally ethnographic. It's feminist. The approach involves feminist methodologies of co-centering experiences. You know, the ethnographic research involves conversations with people in the rural areas, in the hinterlands, as well as the urban areas. We publish autoethnographic reports with reflections on lived experiences, and we were able to publish a couple of years ago now a zine, a small zine that highlighted with men's voices. And we wanted to capture men talking about what it means to grow up in a violent rape society, it was described as by one young man to me. And so I ran with that idea and was able to get several men from diverse ethnic groups and ages to contribute to a small zine where they talked about what they had seen, what they had experienced. And it was, that zine has been distributed to the 10 regions in the country, and it is also available online. So there is a link to it online. So the research that we embark on is collaborative. Generally, I work as, we work as part of research teams. So we engage people in the community who are experts in various areas, especially because even though my training is multidisciplinary and international, I am not an expert in every area of gender studies, but I am approached as though I were an expert in every area of gender studies. And that actually has benefited me in some ways because, for example, I have grown to, I have developed a greater knowledge, for example, and a commitment to environmental justice, which I see as part of racial justice. And I have been able to go into the hinterland and interview women who in the rural areas there and in the hinterlands, who are indigenous women, about farming practices and the needs that they have that are not resources that they need, that are not being met by the government, by other local institutions, about the way they are excluded in many ways from the larger part of the society and the society's resources. So I've gained a greater knowledge of environmental justice and racial justice. I already work from an anti-racist, perspective and a strong Black feminist, African feminist perspective. And so I bring all of that to the work that I spearhead at the Institute of Gender Studies. And the work involves regular local, national, and international outreach and partnering to support successful research initiatives. And why we examine the lives of Guyana's peoples to build equity, sustainable families and communities. And I say that all the time when I refer to the Sustainable Development Goals, to ensure the most vulnerable women and children have equal access to the essential social and other services, to promote a willingness to listen and hear concerns of all community members, including women, children, adolescents, and the differently abled, to ensure that information flows from one level to another, for example, between local, national, and regional bodies, and to advocate for deliberate efforts and actions to right historical wrongs and imbalances. And so the work, again, involves research, it involves writing, it involves workshops, and it involves activism. And these three photos, this was work that we went into the Rupununi area to do and got stuck in one of the many potholes, huge potholes that we had to navigate across that countryside. Recently, I was able to engage a past colleague who is an award-winning journalist for CBC television in Canada, who came to speak, to give a lecture. And I wanted him to speak to my class, but I opened it up to the community, a lecture on gender, culture, media, representations, and representations and development. And that was a very successful event that ended with his agreeing to mentor a young woman here who writes for community newspapers. And then the last image, you will see that, that there was a case of a young woman who had been murdered at 17 years old by a 34-year-old man that had raped her from the time that she was 14 years old. And so as part of our activism, myself and another woman, we created these banners and posters and stood in the community. And in fact, we were joined by the taxi driver that drove us there, to, and he held up the sign also. And we did a silent protest for half the day. And so that's the type of work that I'm engaged in here in Guyana in terms of the Institute's work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pauline. That's, I think this has all given us a great idea of what is happening in the three countries in Guyana. And so I'd like to, we have until 4:30, we have about 20-25 minutes for discussion. So I'd like to invite people, if you have any questions, to post them in the Q&A, and I will see if I can take them. Before we go there, I just want to ask, there is one question for Pauline, but I'm going to just hold on to that for a minute and ask you one question that we've been discussing in my own class, has been about the sort of priorities in Caribbean feminist research for attending to this issue of violence against women. And recently, of course, we've had this big surge, and all of you have mentioned this issue of violence against women as being something that your institute or your program and so forth addresses in different ways. We're hearing more and more talk about this notion of femicide. Is it something that that comes really from Latin America, from Central America? I think the term has been used there heavily. But is it a concept that really resonates through the Guyanas for us? Is it something that makes sense to talk about? And is it relevant today to use that and to continue doing that kind of research and work around violence against women, domestic violence, interpersonal violence, and or are there other big research priorities right now? So that's a question for all of you, and then we can go to the other questions as well. So perhaps each one of you can say something briefly about that.
I can, Julia,
yeah.
You want to go ahead? Go ahead.
Oh, yes. Sorry. Thank you, Pauline. Yes, Kamala. I think this is really big issue, in the past months, and we assume that it also has to do with the COVID pandemic and the fact that whole social life has been disturbed. But it's really of big concern to see how many women were murdered in a very short time, relatively very short time. We just recently had 2 murders, women murders, shortly after each other. And when you look at the discussions on social media, I think that it's not something of a small group of feminists or women. I think it's a concern of whole society. And there is a lot of increased pressure on the government to take measures, and a lot of statements were made recently by the Minister of Justice and Police, and even by the President of the country concerning this really horrible development. But still, we think that not enough is done, in terms of allocation of means, in terms of implementation of policy, in terms of capacity strengthening of service providers. So we still think that a lot still needs to be done.
And here in Guyana, since 2018, I've seen reports of a growing number of women and their children being murdered by the the father of the household, and so that there has been an increase. And what is particularly troubling is the brutality of the crimes, where women are being burned alive with their children. Women are being butchered, being chopped to death. So I was recently actually trying to make a list of some of those particular horrific crimes. But it is really, it's really disturbing to see that that often when it is happening recently, the perpetrator may kill themselves afterwards. So it's also the killing and then a suicide afterwards. So there is that type of situation. It is murdering a woman in front of the children. So it's running over a body and stabbing, multiple stabbings, and then so the crimes are horrific and quite brutal, and it is, and a lot of it is public too. So when you hear that a body has been in the streets and these crimes are committed in front of villagers, who are present, then we know that it breeds fear in the community. And it tells women, if you don't behave yourself, this is what's going to happen to you. You might be next. And so that adds to the fear that women walk around with on a daily basis, based on, sex, based on ideas about gender and gender roles and how we perform them.
Thank you. Yeah. Tina, do you want to add to this?
Yeah. Yes. Well, I was talking about this subject this morning with the president of the association LACWHN, which is an important association in French Guyana that tries to help women in danger. And so, in fact, we don't have a clear view on the numbers. It's like a hidden truth, a hidden reality. And we don't have statistics. As I said earlier, we don't have an observatory on violence against women. So we don't really know what is happening. And it's happening in households, in the so-called safe space of home, which is not a safe space most of the time. And it's happening also outside. So again, I think, I hope that research will develop on that matter. And to answer your question about the concept, I'm convinced that it's useful to use the word femicide because it helps to think of the systematic measure of this problem, because it's the consequence of the patriarchy. It's a consequence of a culture of violence against women. And also the term is useful because there are so many representations on this kind of murder that are misleading. For example, the husband that is killing his wife, well, he was upset, you understand, because she cheated on him, or she wanted to break up with him, or things like that. So this kind of representations don't help, and they are misleading. And a word like femicide should be used and should be taught to students too.
I know in Trinidad there's I think that there's a an effort to try to get some kind of law in place. And Suriname, I think, has a similar one going
Yes,
on.
yes. Suriname has also started, with a discussion on this concept of femicide, and there were initiatives to draft law on, femicide, in addition to the existing national law on domestic violence.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you. Yeah. No, this is really important to know because it is this area that has to be specifically paid attention to, and unfortunately, still, as we say, I mean, gender studies can't seem to get away from this topic. It's really important. I'd like to just switch to some questions that are coming up because there are quite a few here, which is nice to see, and some people that, hello Vanda, very nice to see you. But I'll start off, there are a couple of ones about that are directly to Tina's presentation about the witch, but I'll first of all go to the one from a student in my class that's asking, I can't, why is it not going? Let me just go up. Oops, where are we? We've gone back to front. One question that came in from, it's disappeared, from Lenica, but I'm not seeing it anymore, about trauma and how that's taken up. Was it Lenica? Okay, that's gone.
I answered it.
Oh, you answered it online?
So maybe that's why it disappeared.
Okay, yeah.
But it was in terms of how do we support people who share their stories and share their experiences in various forums. And so my response to that for me is that when we do this work, we share, we share information in the community, of people in the community who do therapeutic work, who are counselors, who are professionals in this area. We do need more experts in those areas to work with people one-on-one in the community. But there are some, not many, but there are some agencies in the various regions that provide support. And in the indigenous villages, there are circles that are formed to also work with people in the village who are experiencing various types of trauma. The challenge there is that when more help is needed that involves a hospital or finding a psychiatrist, another type of specialist, then gaining access, getting the resources to leave the village and to go into the urban areas where you can often access that type of help becomes a challenge for many people because of the poor roads, the transportation problems also. But IGS has a website and we post helpline information there. We share it in much of the work that we do, the literature that we share. We create flyers and share in the community of various agencies and people doing that work.
Thank you. I'm going to move to a slightly different topic because there's this one question from Simone Legrand saying a question for Tina about the thematic of the witch. What will be the next topic explored in FEMPOCO's student writings presentation? But there's also a follow-up question. Is the idea of the witch as an anti-capitalist character relevant in Guyana? Tina, directly for you. Can you say something about these questions?
Yeah, so I should explain, thank you for this question, Simone. I should explain that it was this writing was part of a class that I had in French literature, in the Bachelor of French Literature. So it was a creative class, creative writing class, and it wasn't part of the research seminar, FEMPOCO. So why I feel the need to tell you that it's because actually Dr. Mula or Dr. Manara are doing a lot of interesting work on women and on writing with their students, but it's not within the research seminar. It's something else that is connected, actually, that is linked. So we published the text of my students in the research notebooks, but it's something else. So I don't know yet what I will propose to my students for the next creative writing class, but I suggested last year to write about gardens and women. And the year before that, it was about exile, because we have a lot of students that are coming from migrant families. And it was very interesting to have a conversation about exile. And also because there is a political discourse here in French Guyana that is quite aggressive against foreigners. So I hope that I responded.
I think, yes, you did, because I mean, that takes us into the question posed by Lisa. Hello, Lisa, nice to see you here. About strategies that for all of you have been employing for engaging gender analysis or activism across the ethnic divides that haunt the Guyanas. And I think, you know, these ethnic divides, some of them are very old, and we know this in Guyana and Suriname, particularly between, you know, the Afro and Indo communities, but then also with the indigenous communities and Maroons. But you've all described very, very diverse communities with also very new large migrant populations coming in, particularly from Brazil and Venezuela, Haiti. And so I suppose the question that Lisa's asking is, how is gender studies responding and developing a sort of strategy to work across the kind of divides that we're seeing that haunts the Guyanas, as she says. Yeah, so would anybody like to think about that or respond to that?
Yeah, I can try. I think that gender studies can help because it reveals that there is another group that people don't know of, don't really know about. It's the class of women from diverse origins and diverse communities. So it helps students to identify with another group, a group racially oppressed, a group economically oppressed, and that is women in French Guyana. So it's also easier to talk about violence and to raise issues that are taboo during discussions on gender studies. And of course, students, teachers, researchers can see that there are shared concerns, that it's not the fate of one community, of one social class. It's something much more bigger, if I can say that. So this is why gender studies is important, also to build another representation of the country and what's going on with the structure of power.
Definitely.
Remember to unmute. Thank you. Yeah, that's really nice and helpful. And I think Pauline and Julia probably also kind of feel that that's how the work in Suriname and Guyana also progresses, right?
Yeah.
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 Can I?
Yes, Julia.
Say something on this?
Yes, please.
Yes, you know, just like Tina said, I think that gender studies is a is key, you know, in trying to understand the different needs and concerns, you know, of different women. And I also raised it in my presentation because, you know, when we look at the discussions on gender, you know, that are in the public sphere, then it's you know, on the general issues of gender equality, but we know still very little about what is happening in the different ethnic communities. And we know that there's a lot of resistance there from women, you know, resistance that is not yet visible, that not has a voice yet, but that definitely contributes to change. And what we see in our courses is that students from these ethnic communities, you know, Maroon students, Hindustani students, you know, students from Japanese descent and others, that because they are faced with, you know, they learned new ways of looking at their communities, looking at relations, that they really go in depth with essays and with their bachelor research or master research on these issues. And I think that this is very important in you know, engaging, involving these communities in, you know, the larger public discussions on these changes in gender roles and gender perceptions that are taking place.
Thank you, Miriam. Yeah.
You know, and I like to,
yeah, go ahead.
I wouldn't mind saying, you know, I like to talk to, when I lecture on this, on gender, I like to use Lorber's example of gender as a stratification system. You know, I think, and I know that some scholars have a problem with you know, with that work, but I particularly like using it to illustrate how, you know, people of different genders are ranked, so that it is part of a ranking system that ranks certain bodies above others. And so you know, and I use that too to demonstrate how that type of prejudice can lead from simply excluding people based on, you know, using some derogatory terms, to excluding them in terms of jobs, in terms of where they're able to live, what they have access to economically and socially, and also that is part of a ladder of discrimination that can lead to genocide. And I find that that really helps, you know, and to talk about the ways that we are socialized in our thinking to see this ranking system as acceptable, you know, and much of the joking relationships that are attached to that ranking system as acceptable. We see it in the culture, in some of the, in what is shared as theater in the culture, that can be very, very damaging, base and violent in the language and the portrayals. So I think I quite like looking at it and from that particular perspective.
Fantastic. So we are running out of time here. We have a few questions that haven't been tackled yet. So I'll just name the issues, but ask you also to sort of give perhaps a few closing remarks that you'd like to leave us with. So there's some questions about what are some of the surprises that, as we dialogue together about feminism, what continues to surprise us about feminisms in Guyanas. That's probably for a future discussion we can take up. What ways would we like the diaspora, would you like the diaspora to be further engaged in your feminist work? I think that is something I think that so many of us are diasporic already, that we have these deep connections, that it's an ongoing conversation between the diaspora and the Guyanas in Suriname, in French Guyana and Guyana, but that's a question that stands there. Congratulations on the work that you're doing from Rhoda Reddock. Thank you, Rhoda. Vanda is asking Pauline for some names of other courses and so forth, but we will have to take Vanda's questions. There's a question also from coming in from about the use of the term, about how the term maroon is being used in French Guyana and Suriname. Is maroon being meant being used to represent Afro-descended groups? But that's more than that, isn't it? Definitely. Because Guyana doesn't have the maroon population that Suriname and Guyana do have. So that's a slightly different question. That's a slightly different population group. And there are some questions about follow-ups about how students take up issues of, are they committed to the issues of violence against women? And generally, I think about how, you know, we can continue to work as gender studies scholars on some of these issues. So I'm going to leave it here because we do actually need to kind of end the session. I know there's a lot to talk about. So each one of you, just a minute, perhaps you can wrap up with a few thoughts. If you touch on any of those issues I've just mentioned, that would be great. So shall we just go around with Julia, Tina, and then Pauline? Julia.
Yes. I think that, yes? You hear me? Hello, am I here?
Yes, 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 yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes, yes.
Yes, okay, thank you. I think that there are many issues in which gender issues and our institutes, you know, can contribute, but I think there is a big need for partnerships, for a stronger profiling, because I think that in all our cases, our position at the university is still is a marginal position, you know, and we still have to struggle to survive, in fact, you know, and it's really a process of up and downs. So I think that it's the struggle within the university that is important, but at the same time, to maintain ourselves and to, you know, survive at the university level, it's important to have these partnerships with on the regional level with other universities, and to know how we can come to collective actions and, you know, have a stronger voice. I think also that there are a lot of opportunities, and we saw it with the blended course, you know, the joint course with Guyana, that it's really possible to have a joint effort and to really broaden our scopes and to, you know, make students aware of not only the differences, but in particular the similarities of our you know, context. And yes, I think that it's very important that we go much deeper, you know, into some of these issues, and the issue of femicide was mentioned. I think that the Institute of Gender and Development Studies of the UE, you know, in particular in Trinidad, who's the closest to us, I think that they have a lot of best practices of which we can learn from, you know, also in terms of strategizing, you know, how to move forward, and what are some of the what are some of the ways, you know, to put more pressure on the political yes, political parties, the people in power, you know, to have more attention for gender studies.
Thank you. Next time we'll have to get a panelist in from Trinidad, I think, to join us in this discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. Tina.
And one short comment on that of the Maroons, you know, in Maroons, in Suriname, Maroons are defined as the descendant of the runaway slaves. So with Maroons, we are referring to the Afro-Surinamese populations.
And Creole is meant as the Afro-descended population, the Black population.
Yes, the Creoles are mainly seen as the descendants of the urban Creoles, you know, who remained in slavery, and it was only after emancipation that they were freed. Yeah. But the Maroons were freed long before that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Tina.
Yes, thank you, Julia, for this explanation of the term maroon, because it's the same in French Guyana. It has the same meaning, and Creole refers to mixed people, actually, of African descent, and also from the urban areas of French Guyana. And most of the time, they have ancestors in the West Indies, but also in China or in India, etc. So, but they consider themselves as Black. Mm-hmm. So, well, I was very, very pleased to join this conversation because, I mean, it helps me see what we can do in French Guyana with my colleagues, what we should do, and I mean, strengthen the partnership with you, our neighbors, is very, very important. With the lockdown due to the pandemic, it was not easy to continue our research activities. And in fact, we were planning on going to Guyana last year, but it was cancelled because of the pandemic, and we are really willing to work with you in Guyana and in Suriname because we can learn a lot from you, and I think that you can really help us grow and develop gender studies here in French Guyana. So this is my conclusion.
Thank you very much, Tina. It's really good to have you on board. Pauline.
I have a long list of things that surprise me.
We can't do a long list at this point.
I know. I won't share a long list. What surprises me is that, you know, I come from a family of 5 women. There are 6 of us, and strong-willed, you know, outspoken women. And I was always raised to believe, and the history that I was shared about Guyana was that women have always worked. Guyanese women are strong women. You know, they are activists. And so I grew up with that propelling me forward. And what I find surprising is that many of these strong women that I meet here in Guyana who can be very vocal in certain situations seem to equate feminism with not being feminine. So, you know, and so they want to embrace their femininity and, you know, to be out there with their femininity. But at the same time, they do want to work for equity and social justice. But there seems to be a mind-body split around many of those issues. And so many of them seem to subscribe to this idea that to be feminist is not to be working towards social justice and human rights, but it means, you know, to hate men and to work against men. And so we constantly hear, well, what about the men? You know, when we talk about violence against women, but what about the men? Because they're being abused too. And when we share the statistics, we still hear, but what about the men? And so, and I, you know, and I say we're not talking about excluding the men, but talking about addressing, you know, doing anti-oppression work, doing anti-violence work, doing human rights and social justice work. So it's, you know, the difficulty in getting those points across and getting people to commit to the work on that level is always surprising to me, but onward and forward.
And so we shall go. I want to thank you. I want to thank you all immensely for taking the time and joining us in this conversation. To all the people who attended, thank you for being us. Thank you for being with us, and thank you for your questions and for the information that you've shared also in that in the chat with us. I'll try to pick that up in another way and pass it on to the panelists as well. I would like to thank the Center for Latin American and Caribbean Studies at Brown University, particularly Patsy Lewis, for hosting this and for, you know, enabling this conversation to take part. And I'd like to thank all my students as well. And I hope this has helped you, my students in my Caribbean feminist class, to also get a better sense of how this Caribbean feminism is developing in the Guyanas. We are going to, I know, continue talking. This is our first step, and we're going to meet again, hopefully, the CSA in Guyana, and perhaps start digging a little deeper into what our shared feminist approaches are and what our shared feminisms are in the Guyanas. Thank you very much, everyone. And I look forward to continuing the conversation. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.